So, just a heads up, I'm pivoting away from making objective value judgments and more toward recommending products by seeing who the intended audience might be. And there is something that I want to address because this product is no longer just a regional exclusive to the UK or Europe. It is now in North America, and so I wouldn't be doing this otherwise because I live in the US. And also, as a heads up, I'm going to be using B-roll from a bunch of Warhammer related clips and whatnot because I don't have this product, and you're really not missing much whenever it comes to like the actual visuals. So Imperium magazine is put out by Hachette Publications in the UK, and essentially it allows people to build up two complete armies from scratch, which in theory is a great thing because it allows you to build up, well, two complete armies. And honestly, that is something that can be quite expensive and time consuming and have a lot of trial and error, so you can just go from having something that having no idea of what to build to having everything readily available to you. It's also available for Age of Sigmar, and it appears to be something that happens every edition for at least since 8th edition for 40k and 2nd edition for AOS. It also teaches you the rules, and it supplies you with the hobby tools like paints, brushes, and some terrain as well. However, there is a pretty big drawback, and that is, after the first month, which is $26.90, it shoots up to $74.75, and this includes shipping as well. And then an additional $10 for the binder to store and protect your magazines, so $84.75 a month. This current run has 80 issues in it, so for 20 months in total, and if you were to include the introductory price, it would cost you $1,637.15 over the course of a little less than 2 years. 1 year and 10 months to be exact. Let's compare that with some other adjacent hobbies and interests. You could buy 32 D&D books at the MSRP of $50 a pop, which honestly, unless you're going to an LGS, you're probably not paying that much for. You could buy 5 OLED Nintendo Switches or 6 regular models. It's a little less than what you spend on a Warlord Titan by a little under $500. But the real kicker is that you could buy 11 combat patrols, 9 Kill Team 2021 box sets, or 5 bolt action Stalingrad battle sets. I use these comparisons because oftentimes as hobbyists, we kind of do mindlessly spend money and don't really put that money that we have spent into context. It is possible to change the tune of needing a certain thing to wanting it when you understand what something really costs. I mean, the other thing is that the 8th edition version included a Primarch, but if the 9th edition doesn't include the Silent King or a Monolith, the thing is, you should give people some of the really fun toys if they're shelling out $1.50 for your intro set. And honestly, it's kind of annoying because there's always this accusation of, oh, GW's not, being honest with us. They're just trying to they're just trying to, squeeze blood out of a turnip, all of that stuff. And I get it. Maybe, and I don't know the details between Hachette and GW, but if there's anything I would guess is that they have an agreement probably that, put out X amount of dollars of product per set, per issue, and they've negotiated that as a way to get everything in good order and not to, give people false expectations or false hopes of what, they could buy normally, because they want something that's going to at least appeal to an introductory audience. It really conditions people into spending a whole bunch of money for Warhammer whenever there are better deals out there. But the thing is that I simply don't have the time or the money to dedicate it to actually reviewing this, because I just don't. I graduated from university, I'm working a full-time job, I'm currently saving up a place of my own. If you want, I could, set up a coffee, but I have a little over 100 subs at this point, and I doubt that I'm gonna get, big traction anytime soon. So maybe one day. The first real reason, though, is that it locks a subscriber in a very specific way of playing the game and painting the miniatures. You will paint Space Marines as Ultramarines and Necrons like those on the box. Creativity is limited right out of the gate, so you're not even given the freedom to really experiment and do something interesting. Sure, you could argue these act like training wheels, and so it could be a really good guide, but it looks like from the screen caps and from the videos I've seen that and the pictures of people online who have had the painting guides, that it's more of a paint by numbers scenario where it shifts from being an art form to an assembly line. And if the person just wants a nice looking army they can show off on the tabletop, that's fine. But painting is honestly a portion of the hobby that many of us, including myself, enjoy, because a well-painted mini, even if you because you can enjoy the well-painted mini that you painted yourself, even if you get completely curb stomped at the table. Yes, it is true that you essentially get the entire basic range of Space Marines and Necrons and the various terrain bits to play a game. The problem is that they drip feed it instead of compiling it to actually give a reference for players. They just don't. If you want to play a specific scenario, then you have to go and find the specific issue, and that's just tedious. Even having campaign books and codices are nice to have as a reference, or even those unit cards they had for 8th edition, because it serves as a way to inform people on how to play without having to include the entirety of the rules for both factions and specific issues. So again, you're not having to go and having like 5 different issues just to play out a certain scenario. Granted, a feed drip of the rules is good because it allows for people to really get a feel for the faction and their basic play style, and if they don't like how things are, they could simply cancel the subscription and not proceed any further. Now, that leads me into my next point, and that's the surcharges that Hachette will spring on you without explicit consent because you agreed to it in the fine print of the subscription, which is pretty scummy, no two ways about it. Now, if that happens and you live in the US and you don't want it, there is a way to refuse it, and that is when it comes to your mailbox. Do not open it if it has shrink wrap or any packaging. Rather write REF to the left of the address label and either put it back in your mailbox or take it to the post office. If you live in the United States, you have the right to refuse any unopened mail and to have it returned to the sender. It's what they teach you whenever you train at the post office. I know because I work there. Other countries, I don't know. Sorry about that. Maybe talk to your local mailman. That's the best I can do on that front. Finally, it sets up a Games Workshop ecosystem that really puts people at a disadvantage in the end, because Citadel products are honestly not leading the pack whenever it comes to specific and a consistent basis. The reason why so many people buy Citadel products is because it's there and available. most stores carry a pretty well-rounded rack of paints. If not the entire range, maybe 80 to 90% of it, with a couple of different stuff, you know, not there. Basically a couple of edge paints, or maybe a base coat, or a base paint that just doesn't have the same pull as, you know, others. Although I will say that any rattle can spray primer, it's actually pretty hard to find, I'll be honest. And that's the reason why people buy it. It's not because that they're good products. It's because it's usually the only product locally available for the most part. Nuln Oil and Agrex Earthshade are the exception to the rule. They're probably the best thing that GW makes, let's be honest. Because their pots are pretty terrible. The paints themselves are bad at mixing for the most part, and most people either trade them in entirely for another brand, or they gradually just replace them and keep a couple of colors, because like Thousand Suns Blue is, unless you want to mix up basically some orange to blue, that's the only way that you get Thousand Suns Blue. And you know, they just keep a smattering of paints and washes for what they like. In all honesty, if you want to go and only be in the Citadel ecosystem for all the time you spend in the hobby, then go ahead. But to anyone else, look elsewhere. Look online for Vallejo, for Scale 75, not for Army Painter, because honestly, I've never had the greatest experience with them, and I wouldn't recommend them unless you are absolutely broke. Or actually though, the quick shade washes are pretty good as well. Without exaggeration, this is probably one of the worst ways you can get into the hobby. And honestly, it is not that I want to hate the idea of a drip feed method where it allows people to slowly build up an army and collection of hobby tools as well, instead of giving people zero direction and having to find out through a lot of trial and error, but also giving them good tools, because really good tools will allow you to develop good habits and rhythm in order to get the most out of your time. It also snowballs as well, because there's no way most people are going to finish 4 magazines worth of stuff in a month. Most publications come out in a monthly installment, monthly to quarterly installments, usually. To tack on to that, they offer a premium option to also get a little less than what a combat patrol of miniatures for 4 factions: Orcs, Chaos Space Marines, Tau, and Tyranids. Listen, a pile of shame is something that already comes with the territory of being a collector and a hobbyist. If you stick with it for long enough. I mean, I didn't get my pile of shame until I was like a year and a half in, and I'm kind of working off it right now. Also, if anybody wants to buy a box of Space Marine Reavers for like 35 bucks, hit me up. I am not kidding. I got them as a Christmas present from a Secret Santa, and I'm sorry, Anon. Yeah, I have no intention of ever painting them up unless it's for a video. And to be honest, starting people out like this is a bad idea, because again, most people accumulate it over years, if not decades. Not something you get in the first couple of months of being a collector, which leads me to my other point. It's entirely possible for people who subscribe to Imperium to burn out fast and hard if they aren't careful, because this is not something you can objectively quantify, but you can see where the conditions for burnout make it easier to happen. If I, as a hobbyist, am going to go and to get all of this stuff, and I have a little free time, and that's the only thing I want to paint up is 40k, then it's possible. But if I want to paint up, you know, something that's not 40k, maybe some Reaper minis, some WizKids stuff, some 3D prints that I bought, some Battletech, whatever, I'm not gonna have a good time. And maybe I want to do something besides, you know, painting miniatures. Maybe I want to draw, read, write, all that good stuff. And listen, if people really want me to cover this in full, I'm totally willing to make a Ko-fi and actually budget the money in order for me to objectively review this product. But let's conclude this in earnest. This is something which is made for a beginner to the hobby who wants to get into the current edition of 40k and just wants the current basic stuff. Not really the bells and whistles, and also generally solid selection of hobby tools. Although again, GW products can be really bad. Like, if you have the choice, don't buy GW brushes. Go to your local Michaels or Hobby Lobby. Get a tad more expensive brush and it'll last you longer. Trust me on this. However, if you don't want to spend a fortune in hobby dollars, you know, a little under 85 bucks a month, and you want to get better, cheaper paints and miniatures, I suggest you look into other companies and suppliers. And I will suggest, if you want to get into 40k and you want to get into a specific faction, what I would probably recommend you do is that you go and you buy a combat patrol, or you buy a start collecting box if they haven't, you know, transitioned to a combat patrol yet, like Imperial Guard, and you buy that plus a codex, and you play a game or two with them, and you see how you like to play with them before you go and you spend hundreds of dollars on this. If you really want to get into Space Marines and Necrons, there's a better solution. There are the starter sets that GW puts out. The Recruit Edition, which basically includes typical troop choices. You have the Elite Edition, which includes, you know, some more premium troops for both sides. And then you have the Command Edition, which then gives you plastic terrain in addition to the cardboard terrain. And listen, just get that. I promise you, that will be a much better experience than spending $1,500 for this. And you know, even if you were to buy just the codex, if you were to buy a codex and a rulebook and an Elite Edition, that's still going to cost you less money in the long run, even with the paints and the paints and the hobby supplies included, because these are the colors that you want to paint with. They're not colors that you have some obligation to paint with because that's what the box said that you paint with. And honestly, like, man, whoever came up with this is either like was banking hard on people just liking this and just being mindless consumers. And listen, don't do this. I'm begging you, for the bottom of my heart, don't do this. This is like the... Before you go, don't forget to please like, comment, and subscribe. Anyways, this is Frontiers Horizon signing off, and until next time, stay frosty.